let me introduce briefly, because you know I don't believe you're not here for introductions. You're here to hear what they have to say. I always mispronounce your first name. Jitu?
Jitu.
What?
Jitu.
Jitu. Jitu Brown and his wife Sharon. Where she is, right up there. All right, I know her. Leads an organization called Journey for Justice Alliance, but I just found out that he used to work with the organization of the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, COCO, and I think the original director, Mr. Lucas. He was the postman, way before your time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, so there you go.
He trained me. So
that shows you when you're old, you have a good memory. All right, now, easier. Sarah Karp, where are you, Sarah? Raise your hand. She has the good fortune of covering me in the south suburbs. Poor thing. She has worked at Catalyst. She worked for the Reporter, and she worked for the Daily Southtown. Give a hand to Sarah. We also have next to me Wendy Katten, Executive Director of Raise Your Hand.
That's right.
I pulled that joke already, so I can't do it again. All right. Wendy Katten is the mom of a 6th grader in CPS and the Executive Director of Raise Your Hand. Give her a big round of applause with 2 hands, please. And last but not least, Lauren, I had yours the longest, and of course, I lost it. Lauren FitzPatrick, the education reporter from Chicago Sun-Times, and she covers education since 2012. So, with that, give her a round of applause. Before we start, so these panelists know if the crowd is stacked against them or for them, raise your hand if you went to Chicago Public Schools. Well, we're still doing it. So, Wendy, we're going to go right in order. Okay. Why don't you guys take around 4 or 5 minutes, 6. There's going to be no gong. So, give your basic premise, and then we'll go right to the questions.
Basic premise?
I just make that stuff up.
Okay, so...
How's this? Say what you prepared.
Well, they told me it was going to go straight into questions, so
All
I didn't
right,
prepare anything,
good.
but I'll just talk to y'all.
All
no,
right, Wendy, I was wrong.
I'm just kidding. So I run a parent-led citywide coalition called Raise Your Hand. It started about 5 years ago, basically in response to budget cuts and chronic underfunding. And so my group's kind of turned into a bit of a watchdog group. We attend every board meeting. We really follow all of the policies coming out of the state and city, CPS. Not the state, I meant CPS, but also some of the state. And so we kind of propose policies that we think would improve our public education system, and we also train parents to become advocates for their kids for I would call it a pro-public education agenda. And you know, right now, we know there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of drama, but we're pretty solutions-oriented. That's why I put this handout on your seat today. There are solutions to improving our system. This is just around the budget. We all know we're in quite a mess. But there are solutions, and so we are pushing our leaders, our elected officials, our district to work on solutions that will improve our schools. And so, I mean, that's
well,
good.
Wait a minute. You got another minute. Give us one of your solutions.
Well, for the budget, there's not one lever, there's not one thing. I think we hear a lot of groups talking often about one thing that will fix this mess that we're in. And so if you look at our sheet, we need the state working with us, we need the city working with us. We've been pushing for the use of a TIF surplus for 5 years. I think we helped get that first TIF surplus returned by bringing 5,000 letters to Mayor Daley. That's not a long-term sustainable solution. It's a short-term bridge until we can come up with revenue that we need for our schools. We've identified over $170 million in cuts to contracts at CPS. We have asked for things from certain offices like soups. We've gone to every meeting since Sarah put that story out, asking them to cut that contract. There's a lot that can be fixed.
Okay, round of applause. Well done. And she did it without notes. Okay, now Sarah, you're up.
So again, my name's Sarah, and I spent the last 10 years working for Catalyst, which is a small independent magazine that covers Chicago public schools and other urban education issues. I recently went over to the Better Government Association, and I'm doing much of the same stuff there as I have been doing at Catalyst. I think that the biggest thing that I am concerned about is, I'm concerned about the money issues with Chicago Public Schools, and of course, all the issues of class sizes and different academic programs. But I think that the reason why I've been effective, and also Lauren, and also the other education reporters in town, and one thing that's really great is that we have some education reporters that have been around for a while, and can really, really press officials on what's happening and what they should be telling us. And right now, I'm really concerned about the budget. I'm concerned that we're not getting a lot of great information about what's going on in the budget, and that Chicago Public Schools, the officials there, seem to think that the no comment on the budget is the proper response. I think that we, that the public, not as a parent, as a reporter, we want to know how much is in the bank. We want to know what you can pay and when you can pay it. We want to know why you balanced the budget last year, but now you can't pay your bills. And we also want to know, like, what with David Vitale, with all these different deals, all these different loans over time, what were those terms? Were they negotiated in good faith? Did anybody make any money off of these deals? Anybody's friends, anybody's neighbors? I think it's really important right now, because we do have a school system that's highly privatized, that reporters really pay attention to the economic and the other types of political interests of all the players. I think it becomes so, it's very amorphous. I mean, it's hard because, with private organizations, there's private companies. It's not like there's, they have to tell you everybody who's going to make money off of the company. But we have to sort of follow those things, because we want to make sure that what's getting to students is vetted and is for academic reasons, and not because somebody has a vested interest in getting it to them. So I think that's the biggest thing for reporters right now, education reporters, is just to really pay attention, keep our eyes open, read those board packets, read those procurement reports, ask for information, demand information, make sure that the government is transparent.
Round of applause. Well done. Before we answer, sorry, I didn't mention the Better Government Association. I have this thing about Andy Shaw that's just,
It's okay.
very difficult for me. All right, Lauren, you're up.
Okay, so I came to education reporting at the Sun-Times 3 years ago. It was the summer before the teacher strike. I got thrown in. I've been doing a bunch of courts and criminal and legal reporting in the south suburbs. They literally tapped me on the shoulder and said, here you go, go cover the schools, enjoy the strike, all the rest. So I feel like every day I'm just trying to keep up. I'm trying to fight for information for all of you. I'm trying to demand answers. And the scary part about this round of contract negotiations is that with Sarah off the Daily Beat, and with Rosalind Rossi, who was I was her partner really at the very beginning. I mean, they've moved her onto a different beat. I am one of the veteran reporters, and I only have a couple of years experience doing this, but at least I've been through this process once before. So, by nature, I'm kind of cheap, so wasting money drives me crazy. What you're spending money on drives me crazy. Those are stories I tend to look for. I'm going to save the rest of this time for you all to ask questions. So, in closing, just call me. If you know stuff, call me.
Or me.
Jitu, you're up.
Yes, sir. Well, I think that, first I'm, again, Jitu Brown, and for many years, I was the education organizer for the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. We made 50 this year, and we're the oldest African-American-led grassroots community group in the city. I say that because Chicago used to have a wealth of grassroots community organizations, all parts of the city. That was one of the reasons that Harold Washington became the first African-American mayor in Chicago. A lot of those groups aren't around anymore. But one of the things I'm proud of at the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization as a multi-issue, member-driven organization. In other words, our agenda is pushed by our members. Our members are working in low-income African-American families from no income to a family median income, maybe $40,000. That comprises our base. But we just this year went over 1,000 members, so I'm really happy about that, and happy about the fact that one of the things that's happening at COCO is that we're producing grassroots leaders that have moved on to other, start their own organizations, move for public office and things of that nature. So we're trying to be the type of organization that can be trusted in our community, where people can come, work, learn, grow, realize their capacity, and step out and impact their community any way they see fit. And I'm an example of that, because 2 years ago I was kind of thrust into this position of being the national director of the Journey for Justice Alliance. And it really wasn't hard to pull this alliance together. It's 37 community organizations, 23 cities, soon to hopefully be about 25, fighting for community-driven school improvement. Because in good public schools across this country, when we take race off the table, communities are very engaged in how their schools look. When they say jump, the school board says how high. But it's different in urban communities, and it really is. It's different. And so a lot of our work has been, one, to lift up the inequities that exist in public education, and I just share one with you now. Me and my wife were looking for a school to send our son. We were lucky, you know, we burned tea leaves, we burned incense, we prayed to the gods, and he was enrolled into Agassiz, which folks may know. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, because I always mispronounce it, but which is like on Diversey and Ashland. And I guess they let the wrong guy in the school, because when I'm walking through, and I'm looking at the online video, and we're getting our orientation, I'm looking at a school where every teacher has a teacher aide. I'm looking at a school where the children are learning 1st grade through 8th grade Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, and Spanish. I'm looking at a fully stocked library. And I was happy for those babies there, because it was a pretty diverse school, maybe 15% African American, you know, 30% white, et cetera, et cetera. But what kept ringing in my head is Mollison. Well, I've worked with young people and parents at Mollison since the 1990s. And I know that Mollison has a library, but no librarian. I know that Mollison is so crowded that 25% of the children eat their lunch in the classroom as a result of being a receiving school for Overton. And the things I'm saying to you now, when you hear the promotion of corporate education intervention, no one tells those stories. That at the same time that the children at Agassiz are receiving a world-class education, their children on 44th and King Drive are being cheated. And they're not being cheated because they're lazy, they're not being cheated because they don't want to learn. They're being cheated because there's a higher set of expectations for one group of children than another. And our work has been to be willing to take the political hits and to be loyal to our members. I mean, to really be, and hopefully help us to realize that maybe my lens is not the lens I should be looking through.
Jitu, we're going to have to hold you there, because we got a lot of questions, and we want to move it along, okay? Well, round of applause for the gentleman.
Okay. You messed. I had a quote that I felt was going to go over
real
real
quote,
good.
Do your quote.
Right,
we never forbid quotes. Go ahead.
So to close, Alice Walker.
He's been here before. Go ahead.
Alice Walker says that no one is your friend who demands your silence and denies your right to grow. And I think that in Chicago public schools, our silence has been demanded. And the reality that we see every day has been ignored. And I think that's something, as a society, it makes us worse when we accept that, when that's an acceptable part of the discourse.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, well, if we have to raise your hand. If you have questions, we have 2 people to pick them up. We have a couple here, but we want to get to the questions and we want to get to specific issues. Sort of a general question, partly coming from Mr. Doherty, partly coming from the moderator. The city just borrowed $1.1 billion. Now, Now, obviously, that goes for city, and we know the public schools have their own levy, and they have their own source of revenue. Those basically come from the same people, but nevertheless. Forgetting all the past, forgetting all the other things that got us here, I know a little bit about budget making, and it's always about the present and the future. You can fight about the past all you want, but that's not going to get you going on your budget for the today and tomorrow. In any order, raise your hand, jump and speak out. What can the public schools, what can the school board do to alleviate the situation that they face right now, including the big B word, bankruptcy?
I mean, that's what I have in this document. They can use a TIF surplus. They could try to get, I know this isn't popular, but if they're desperate, they could try to get the PTEL raised at the state level, although the governor obviously doesn't want to do that because he's trying to do a property tax freeze. They could cut contracts in a big way. I think they have over $1 billion in contracts right now. They can cut some of the central office departments I mentioned earlier. And, you know, they can push the state for revenue. We have to do that. They can push, I mean, we just had a tax cut during a huge fiscal crisis at the state level. We let the income tax fall from 5% to 3.75%. And so we want nice things, but we don't want to pay for them. And so I think that everybody who really cares about funding education properly would call all parties, the state, the city, their aldermen on the TIF surplus, and you know, and on the CPS level, cut those costs, especially in the contracts.
Anyone else want to jump in besides the moderator? Anybody? Cowards die many times before their death. The valiant taste death but once.
Well, I just want to say something that, you know, the $1.1 billion budget deficit is a huge, you know, it sounds very huge and very formidable. But in reality, we've faced that many times before, and there's always seemed to be something that they've been able to do. And a lot of the times, their solutions are actually fairly, you know, common sense that you kind of wonder why you didn't do that before. Like, I remember a couple years ago, they decided they were going to turn off the lights in schools at night, and that would save them a couple $1 million, or like cancel magazine subscriptions. And so, while, you know, obviously you're going to need to do bigger things, and probably there's going to be a whole combination of ways that they get out of this, between borrowing and bringing in new revenue, and maybe the state can help. I don't know exactly what the state will wind up doing, but you know, perhaps they can spread out payments to the pension system over a longer period of time. I've heard some people talk about that being a possibility. But I also think that, you know, when you hear the school district say that, you need to really, you know, sort of put your antenna up, because also they'll say every 2 minutes, oh, we cut $740 million from central office already. But let me tell you something. They may have cut it, but they're not saying that there's $740 million less being spent on central office than, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. They've cut that money, and then they've added some stuff. And, you know, I got into a big fight once with the past communications director, Becky Carroll, where she's like, you know, she's just like, well, you know, we've cut it. And I'm like, but, you know, most of us, if I say I cut that money, then I think I'm spending less on it. And that's not the case. If they were to cut $740 million from central office, you would have nobody working there. So I think that people really need to hold them accountable for what they're saying, and really, notice that there are ways to save money, and they do find those ways when they need to.
I would also just add that while I agree that we have a budget crisis, I also think we have a priorities crisis. When you look inside the Chicago Public Schools budget, there's about $700 million dedicated to privatization, and I'm probably being conservative. You have the Office of New Schools, the Office of Innovation, entire departments that are dedicated to brokering the responsibility of educating our children to private operators. And when we say things like that, people automatically brand you as anti-charter. And I'm not anti-charter school, as centers of innovation that can provide lessons for the district. But now, in the midst of a supposed budget crisis, there's a proposal to add 36 new charter schools, even though there's at least 30,000 empty seats in charter schools around the city of Chicago. So my question to the audience is, why are they being allowed to do this in our name? Because to me, if you want to balance the system, you should focus on equity. Because I don't see parents in neighborhood schools banging down CPS's door and saying, I want a Noble Street. I see parents asking for stability, and that's what's not being addressed. Many of the neighborhood schools in our community are unstable because of neglect. And if we're not, so I think a prerequisite to choice is stability. So I would look at the priorities that CPS has placed and how much money is being flushed down the hopper towards privatization, and then just, let's start there.
Okay. Now, is it the view of the panel? The moderator's got to be cantankerous. It's some role I seldom play, right? So are you suggesting, the three of you who just spoke, that somehow there's a conspiracy on the Chicago School Board that want to screw people in the city over, that the money is there, it's just got to be reprioritized, that there really isn't a budget problem, and that the pension debt that they owe, that the union has said they want everything, total payment. They don't want any stretching out, and the state of Illinois has its own problems. It's like an alcoholic trying to stop drinking and going to a bar. Are they conspiratorial? Are they basically a bunch of educational savages? Are they rotten people who just simply won't do what needs to be done? Answer that, please.
I would say there's a real serious deficit right now, and I think that we don't know the real number, and there has been a deficit every year since Raise Your Hand started, which was just 5 years ago. There is a real deficit. And we do need revenue, and they do need, and I agree with Jitu in that they have, the district has made a lot of poor spending decisions, and they keep opening schools. Our enrollment in this district is lower than it's been in decades. There's no, I'm as against opening a new selective enrollment high school as I am the new charter proposals. Because when you have the enrollment that we do with the students that we have, they've been totally irresponsible in the proliferation of schools, and it's been charter schools. And whether you think charters are great or not, if you're fiscally responsible, you would know that opening up more is a bad idea right now.
Okay, well, Lauren, you've been very silent.
I am paid specifically to not have opinions.
I'm sure Mr. Kirk at the Sun-Times is thrilled to hear that. Okay, but this question is for you. This is from Josh Kaufman, Teach Plus Chicago. Teach Plus. Okay. If you were CEO of CPS,
Okay.
let that sink in for a second. Okay. What is one idea you would offer to improve education for all Chicago students? One idea. Take your time.
Yeah, I mean, my idea is to stay out of the way of people who know what they're doing already. Because, I mean, the tricky part is clearly deciding who those people are and how you decide that. But I think we can all agree that there are some folks in CPS who are running good schools and do have the support of their community and do know what they're doing and struggle, pick up the phone when, all these new mandates come down saying, no, it's time to change the way you're already doing things. And they're like, but we're doing things right, so why are you messing with us now, taking up more of our time with meetings? So, I mean, I think that is my one idea. Leave the people alone who already clearly know what they're doing.
Okay. They keep coming in, don't they? Late returns. We got to start putting pens on the table because some of this is very hard to read with the lighting up here. So, Wendy, you are my official reader. Read from Nora Handler. What's the question? Can't read it.
Do you think an elected school board would help CPS?
Do you think an elected school board would help CPS? We had a panel on this, I believe. Jitu, you were on that panel, as was Andrea Zopp, who probably won't be talking about that much in the future. So, would an elected school board make a difference? Sarah?
I'm agnostic on this. I definitely think that the calls for an elected school board are that people want more of a voice in education and what goes on. And they feel like for too long, there's been a school board and a mayor and perhaps a CEO that has turned a deaf ear to community concerns. And so, I think that from what I've read, there's pros and cons of an elected school board. I think that the Sun-Times wrote, it should be more representative, maybe more of a vetting process as we've once had in the past, sort of a nomination process through the community. I think that would be good. But I also see dangers in an elected school board. I mean, we have, people like, we have a lot of people coming in with a lot of money, and they've set up groups in Chicago, and I'm pretty sure that they could come up with some money to run some people that would work against the interests of the community and work for the interests of those people. So I think there's some danger there.
Anyone else want to jump in?
If you read my story in Monday's Sun-Times about how the last CEO got vetted and hired, I spoke with some school board members from big districts around the country, and Philadelphia was one of them. And I don't know if this is the answer, but they're partly appointed by the mayor and they're partly appointed by the governor. So at least there's more than one person who has some input in how they work. Then again, I talked to Los Angeles too, where a former teacher who now sits on their board, I'm pretty sure he told me that $4 million went into his race alone. And it was a he. He held on to a seat, but it was some insane amount of money for one of like 8 or 9 school board members. So I don't know.
Jitu?
Well, I believe that we definitely need an elected representative school board in the city of Chicago. I think that if the school board can raise our taxes, if the school board creates public policy, then they should be able to be held accountable for their decisions. I'm part of the coalition where we developed a proposal for a 13-member school board, 4 regions in the city of Chicago, compensation for school board members, a responsibility of school board members to actually have an understanding of local issues and what's happening in local schools before they make decisions. There are ways around a lot of the issues that we talked about. In New York, the city councilman races, they actually have public financing. So there's a public match for whatever people can raise that maybe, have corporate interests backing them. So, and I think in Chicago, we've demonstrated that despite the fact that people can spend a lot of money, we can give them a run for their money. And so I think that what we have in this city is beginning to have is a conscious constituency. People from completely different walks of life are working together because we realize that we do have some common interests. 15 years ago, there's no way that me and Wendy Katten would be sitting at the same table talking about what's going on with schools. But we do on a regular basis now because just like I don't have a voice, neither does she. And I think another thing we need to look at is that appointed school boards are highly racialized. The only city in this country that is not serve primarily children of color that has an appointed school board is Montclair, New Jersey. Everywhere else, Detroit, Philadelphia, Chicago, New Orleans, the right to vote is taken away from the constituents, and all these reasons as to what could be the problem. We don't want to make it too political. How could it be more political than it is right now? Honestly, you have the board president of Chicago Public Schools, who used to be the board president of the Academy of Urban School Leadership. They have about 27 schools in the city. I was in a meeting with Tim Cawley and Alderman Pat Dow, where Tim Cawley, who used to be the CEO of Academy of Urban School Leadership, is openly advocating for Doolittle East to become an AUSL school. And I was the only one in the meeting with the backbone to challenge him on it and said, well, wait a minute, who do you work for? And so how could it be more political than it is right now? Right. Why are there open Title VI civil rights complaints about the treatment of children at Mollison and Dyatt? The U.S. Department of Education has never come into communities and done focus groups with people because the claims are so valid. That should not be happening on our time and on our watch. So yes, we need an elected school board in the city.
Remember, we had a session on that. Okay, once again, very light writing, therefore my official reader, Wendy. You think it's easy, huh?
Yeah. Within the short and long-term challenges in CPS finances, where does creative education fit in your priorities for educating our kids?
And that's from?
Sydney from Be Creative, the campaign for Chicago.
Well, what a connection. They want something creative from an organization that's called Creative. That's fine. This is a city club. We don't make... Sarah, what's creative in the schools besides the budget maker?
Yeah. So I think arts education, I mean, I think nobody would disagree that arts education is important. I think that, there's a lot of priorities, and I think that one of the issues that Jitu brings up is really important, and that's that principals are having to make a lot of decisions on, do you have art? Do you have low class sizes? Do you have gym is now a mandate? Do you have gym every day, or do you have music class? And that those are some of the things that are really, really hard to get a handle on a district-wide level. Even the people inside the district sometimes don't even really know what's going on. The other thing that's kind of interesting there is that there's this movement in arts education to hire a lot of contractors to do work. So I don't think it's terribly bad to have like the Joffrey Ballet come in and do some lessons with kids. But I think that most teachers and most studies have shown that certified arts teachers are far better than just contracting with somebody here and there.
Okay. Go ahead, Wendy.
I would say that every school in CPS is different. You could move to any block in the city and not have any idea what that school is going to offer. You could move to Agassiz or a mile away to my son's school where arts aren't funded by CPS. So the inequity is huge, and it varies. And because of our test-based accountability system, right now what gets measured is what's being pushed. And so we have to change that system where our district is using test scores to punish schools all the time, to close them, and so, to turn them around, to rate them, to promote students, to rate principals and teachers. So without changing that, we can have all these discussions about how each school could maneuver on their own, but that larger policy thing needs to be addressed because principals are often putting their money in test prep and other things in some schools, and it varies across the board. But you have to really address why this stuff is happening. Some of it's a budget issue, and some of it's a fear of your reading and math scores not going up.
Okay, now, the old moderator, emphasis on old, we've been doing this for 20 minutes, and none of you, not one of you, has put any kind of even tangential blame on the demands of the Chicago Teachers Union. Are they totally out of this? In other words, they're an innocent bystander to this whole process? Does the Teachers Union, do the teachers have any responsibility for the current problem? That's why I'm the moderator. When I asked the question, they just jumped to respond.
I'm talking too much. I could blabber on forever.
Anybody.
I think that,
yes
when you look at, if we're talking about pensions, you look at the teachers, the city didn't pay into the pension fund in the right amount for 20 years. And so now we have a very high pension payment that needs to be made, right? That is an issue, but it's not the teacher's fault for how they got there. They had a contract. And by the way, when people are talking about the Chicago Finance Authority and how great that would be, they're the ones that signed on to have the teachers take the 2% payment for their pension. And so that's something some people complain about, but I think it's important to know those facts. And, the teachers, they're working really hard in really tough conditions in our schools.
So they have no responsibility. So your answer is because the board screwed up before in not making full payments. Now that they have to make a full payment that the board doesn't have the money for, the teacher should demand a full payment, realizing how bad shape fiscally the board is.
I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some protracted, I don't know about what you mentioned with some kind of protracted payment system.
Okay, anyone else jump in?
I mean, I think that I agree with Wendy that, there should be some accountability for the decisions that were made to basically forego the pension payments. When people work, and they commit their time in the classroom, they have a right to some stability in their lives, as they get older. And so I think that the effort of blaming teachers has really just been an instrument to clear the path for corporate education interventions.
Where does the money come from, Jitu?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways the money can
Well,
come.
then, not these nickels and dimes. We're talking, what's it, 591 million? They got to come up with some number like that?
643 million.
600. I've always been conservative. 643 million. Where are you going to get that kind of money? You're not going to get it by saving $3 million on art supplies.
No, but you can definitely, I think Wendy made some very tangible suggestions around the TIF surplus. I think there's an opportunity for a progressive income tax that we should look at in this city and the state of Illinois. I think the opportunities, you know, they're very creative and they move very quickly when it comes to destabilizing schools and making decisions that actually harm people. We have to look at what type of revenue do we need to raise to make sure that every child in the city of Chicago gets a
Well
world-class
said,
education.
but you have a constitutional requirement, and that takes time. Springfield isn't exactly a well-oiled machine getting things done. So you say the state has responsibility.
They
They're
work as well
busted
as we
too.
demand them to work.
Pardon?
They work as well as we demand for them to work. Now, if we sit back and let them say that, then the same type of broken machine that keeps, you know, operating will continue to do the same. I think that we have to demand that there is an equitable taxing system in this state, as well as make sure that TIF funds that are supposed to go to blighted communities don't go towards rebuilding the Willis Tower.
I hear teachers saying that they just don't want to be the only ones making all the sacrifices. That you can, I mean, if you did a count of how many folks at central office or in the network offices are making more than, I don't know, $120,000, $150,000 a year, I mean, there's lots of them. And that there are administrators who are getting nice raises every year too. So, I mean, that's what I hear them saying, that it's not fair to put all of this on the backs of the teachers.
I wasn't saying all of it. I'm just saying, are they excluded from this? Moving on. Gabe Lyon, not a member. Are you a member of the City Club? Almost. Best answer I've had in a long time. Mark that one down, Martha, Secretary. Almost. Chicago Architectural Foundation. Of the dollars being spent right now, what is working? What should have more dollars? Or what is working? Let me paraphrase, because you're almost. What's working and what's not working? What's working?
Well, there's a lot of schools that are working very well in the city of Chicago. I mean, we have some of the best schools in the city of Chicago, but also there are schools in poor neighborhoods where I walk in and I'm like, wow, this is a great place to be. You know, there's a lot of teachers, a lot of principals who are really, you know, they really care about kids. And it goes, you know, it's the neighborhood schools, it's the selective enrollments, it's the magnet schools. I mean, there's a lot of good things happening out there. And you know, I say that you can go into any school and find a wonderful teacher. And you can go into, you know, probably any school and find a teacher that's eh. So, you know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of hard work under very challenging circumstances.
I think the system's commitment, one thing that I think is working is, and I think this is one of the reasons you see an increased graduation rate. How increased is up for debate. But I think the commitment to young people in 9th grade with programs like Freshman Connection, I think that works. Really looking at the freshman on track rate has actually resulted in an emphasis on young people when they're at their most vulnerable. And I think that is a good decision that was made by the district. That was one of the few things that Arnie Duncan did here that I actually agreed with, was his focus on doing programs like Freshman Connection, where young people for 6 weeks they got acclimated to high school. His support of Voices of Youth in Chicago Education, which is a youth organizing collective around the city, where young people actually set up freshmen and what they call freshman teams, where the older students mentored the younger students, took them on retreats. And this resulted in young people that were actually more engaged in school, because we know that when young people fail classes as a freshman, that increases the possibility of them dropping out. So it was really important. We did it at Kenwood, we did it at Diet, and it had a huge impact on just young people being more engaged and feeling like they belonged to something. So I think that's one of the things I would agree with the district. You know.
Hancock High School is working.
Kenwood?
Little Village High School is working.
I think there are tons of things working in so many schools. We recently started a blog, a Tumblr thing called CPS Success, and in over 2 months, I think we featured more than 300 schools where, it's even surprising me, schools I didn't know about where there are great things happening. I think a lot of times in CPS, great things are happening despite some bad policies. And I just want to add, I kind of disagree with Lauren, don't get mad at me, that we actually need a CEO who will lift up our schools and have a really, there are great things happening, but that doesn't mean there's great things happening everywhere, and we need a CEO who can stand up to the mayor with a really vision, a quality vision for teaching and learning that's not test-based, who can actually push this out to more of the schools, because I don't think leaving schools alone, which is kind of what we are doing now, is the answer. But check out our blog on our website. There are great things happening in every part of the city in a lot of schools. And I think we shouldn't think of investing in one program or one thing, but more of, we need to invest more in open enrollment neighborhood schools, because those are the schools that can't kick kids out, don't have barriers to access, have to accept everyone, and those schools need us.
Boy, Wendy, too bad the aldermanic elections are over. Doesn't she sound like a...
I'm not running.
No,
I care about this issue a lot.
The city club is somewhat political at times, as you may have read. All right. Little humor there for you longtime city club members, obviously. Okay. Well, our last question is from who's been incredibly quiet today, Troy LaRiviere, who's been on this panel, talking about, I think it was, elected school boards, if I'm not mistaken. Pardon? Charters. Oh, that's where you and Ms. Zopp had a... Yes. It was, for all you fight fans, Graziano, Lamada, it was good. I go way back. Okay. Do you mind if I just paraphrase this? He says, I'm a Mollison graduate, and he went there, and he says, quote, Mollison and this library are obviously not CPS priorities. What are their priorities? Are they the right priorities? How most are these priorities going to change? What he saw in the library was that just a lifeless area for storing books. Now, Jitu, you talked about Mollison. It's getting more play here than I thought, but why don't you briefly give your analysis?
Okay.
Yeah, briefly, I knew what threw him off.
Yes, sir. So there's a community coalition in Chicago called GEM, Grassroots Education Movement. It's made up of many of the strongest community-based organizations in the city. And one of the things that we want Chicago to become is a sustainable community school district, as opposed to a choice district. And so Mollison is one of those schools that we want to emphasize. We believe that there are 5 pillars to sustainable community schools: a curriculum that's engaging, challenging, and culturally relevant, support for teachers, not a commitment to standardized tests, wraparound supports for every child, a student-centered school environment, and lastly, transformative parent and community engagement. We should make sure that every school has those 5 pillars, and if they don't, we shouldn't blame the people that's been neglected. We should raise the question why. And so I think that it's schools like Mollison, or several schools on the west side of Chicago, or some schools that are even in communities like Brighton Park, we should raise the question is, why don't children have what they need? And then look at where's the district spending its money. Good schools are not a mystery. I've worked in excellent schools. I've trained teachers from excellent schools. I know what good schools look like, and I'm not the only one that knows that. It's not, and so we have to be honest about why some schools are neglected. It's not a pretty picture when you look at it, but it will make us a better society if we're honest about it.
Anyone else want to jump in? Sarah?
Well, if you're asking what are the priorities, not what should be the priorities. I mean, this is, I mean, according to the politicians we've elected, I mean, this is a school district of choice. We are, you heard Brazard talk about this. You heard Barbara Bird Bennett talk about this. We are a portfolio school district. If you listen to Paul Hill from the Center for Reinventing Education, you'll find out a lot of things about what's going to happen in the school district and why things did happen. This is it's a philosophical belief, and that's why, even if you can look at the the reasons why are we opening more schools? Well, we have already schools that have plenty of seats. It has nothing to do with we need the schools. It's because of a philosophical reason. And once you understand that, things are much clearer. I mean, this is a vision, and not to say that people who have that vision are right or wrong, because everybody has different different outlooks on it, but they do believe that opening up new schools will create more high quality schools, and that privatization is a good thing.
Can I just add?
Go ahead, Wendy.
I would say, though, if anyone reads any research on education, anything that's out there other than maybe what was written by Paul Hill, they would find that that is not an education policy. So it is good or bad. We actually do have to understand that that's not something that anyone that's studied, written, or worked in education has ever said is a good thing. So I just want to state that.
Right. A lot of this comes from business schools and less from education schools.
Right.
And a lot of the people that run education in big school districts are from business schools, not from education schools. I definitely expect our next CEO to come from a business school and not from an education school.
Yeah, we're applying the free market system of business to education, and there's nothing out there that says that that is appropriate.
Well, now we get it. Unfortunately, we're coming near the end. Now we're getting a little sparks going on. Okay. Now listen. This is going to be a one-sentence answer. A lot of people. I've been in this business longer than any of you of education. Hard to believe, I know. Everyone keeps downing tests as a means of evaluating students. And yet, the sociologist Robert Putnam, the man who wrote Bowling Alone and all the other kind of stuff, now has come out with a book that says race is no longer the great divider in American society, it's education. If you don't give tests, how do you develop students to compete in college for the kinds of jobs that will get them into the upper middle class? One sentence. What is the substitute for testing? One sentence.
No one's saying to eliminate testing. It has to be a run-on sentence. There's a difference between high-stakes standardized testing used excessively. Teachers give tests all the time. My group's not for eliminating all standardized testing, for lowering the stakes and using testing in moderation.
Sarah.
I think that Wendy's right. You need some level of testing. I think that it does hold people accountable. I think that No Child Left Behind, even though people disagree with the high stakes portion, it's very good that we have information about what's happening with subgroups through test scores. But I will just say one thing. One thing that Illinois is missing is that we do not have a high school exit exam. And so all these tests along the way, in the end, we give out high school diplomas without really any knowledge that kids have any base of knowledge. And I think that's something that is, as we started opening, I don't know if you read, I did this story about how there's all these online schools starting up, for-profit schools that CPS is funding. But we have no high school exit exams. So if you can get a high school credit in 3 days, maybe we're going to test you all the way along the way, but we're going to give you that diploma. So I think that what tests are important.
Lauren.
What's the question?
Think it's easy being a moderator, eh? All right. One sentence, which obviously has not been followed. Nevertheless, he says it again. If we take away testing as to judge students and what they've learned and how much they've accomplished in school, what's the substitute?
No, you don't take it away. You just do less of it, period.
Just less testing?
Yes.
Jitu.
Balanced assessments like the University of Chicago Lab School where the mayor's children go.
As an alumni from that university, I could tell you that you have no idea how correct you are. Okay, how about a big round of applause for our